yes, it's good to be here. My name is Scott Blackerby from the Leonard Preservation League. And I was so happy to be invited by Tom and Linda. They came by the museum one day and took a tour and just thought it was the best thing. So they said, hey, you need to come to Grapevine. And I said, oh, okay, I'll come to Grapevine. So they kind of gave me a little arm twist. That was all right. I did print off a little brochure here for you. If you see the brochure in your seat. Some of you in the back may not have grabbed one. I think I had just had enough for some of the front there, so y'all can pass it around. Now, this is a collector's item brochure because as you notice, if you open it up, it's a puzzle. You have to turn it around. So I did misprint those, so I'm not going to charge you for it. So, okay, you can have them for free. But it gives just a little snapshot of kind of what's in and around Leonard as just for somebody visiting that is kind of unfamiliar with the town. In 1980, Leonard celebrated its 100th anniversary. And up to that point, 3 or 4 years, there were some concerned citizens that got together and formed the Leonard Historical Society, very similar to your Grapevine Historical Society. They were a loose conglomeration of folks that were concerned about Leonard and wanted to preserve its history because they saw it running away without any documentation. And so anyway, they created this history society, and they came up with a history book, which Grapevine probably also has a centennial history book. We prepared one of those with a lot of the family histories and events leading up to that 100th anniversary, and it quickly sold out. So you can't buy one of those anymore. If you have one, you know, it's also a collector's item because you can't find it anymore. But as time went on, those folks passed on, and we came up close to the year 2000 or so. And that information was getting a little dated because we had 20 more years of information to put together. So some other people in Leonard formed a Leonard Preservation League, which is a 501c3 organization to accept donations. And we primarily operate the Leonard History Museum. So we're the caretakers of the museum and the funders of the museum. And in our collection, we have an original 1942 Leonard fire truck. You know, that's pretty exciting for the kids. They can come in and they can, turn on the siren and blow the whistle and all that sort of stuff. And we also have an original 1905 safe from a Mosler safe from the Leonard Bank. So we have that and a lot of other collections of primarily Leonard-related artifacts and farm equipment, beauty shop type equipment and military memorabilia. So that's pretty much what we do in a nutshell, is to preserve that and in the best we can. Let's go. So to give you a little background, and a lot of you may know this, and I like maps. Y'all like maps too? I like maps. You can get a lot of information from maps. This is a 1839 map of Texas from Hunt and Randall, which is at the Texas State Library. But you can see I've put a red dot there on the approximate location of where Leonard is now. This is not to scale, so some of the rivers aren't really in the right place and things like that, but that's about what it is. And you can, let me get my mouse here, see if I can. Yeah, can you see my mouse? Nope, can't see the mouse. So, as you can see, this is a fairly high prairie in there where that red dot is. So to the north of us, the land drains away into the Red River. To the east of us, it drains into the Sulphur River watershed. To the south and east, it drains into the Sabine River. To the south and west, it drains into the Trinity River watershed. So this is just a high area, and you can see it kind of goes off up into Oklahoma. That was a natural pathway for buffalo, which if, the buffalo are running through, so were the Native Americans moving through there. And then the settlers, because it was easy. They didn't have to cross as many creeks. It wasn't as wet. They could get their wagons across it. So it was a major thoroughfare from east to west as they were coming through to settle. It was mainly home to the primarily Catalan tribes, the Wichita tribes, and to the western end, the Comanches as well. So, also that being said, most of those were fairly sedentary tribes except for the Plains Indians. But you know what changed most of that? Anybody have an idea? The Spanish. The Spanish with the horses. Okay, once the Spanish came in the 1500s, that changed the whole way that the Native Americans operated, especially the Comanches, because they learned to be expert horsemen. So, make sure I got all that first. Yeah, we'll go on. So this is a representation of the area around Leonard, what it would have looked like 300 years ago. So you've got really fertile grasslands for generations and generations, and it was shaped by fire. Okay, so as prairie fires came through, it provided fertilizer for the next grasses that came up. So you have layers and layers and layers of nutrient-rich, what we call humus layer. So when the first settlers came through and they busted it up and planted wonderful crops, beautiful crops, it was utopia. So that was all across the fertile plains, but it didn't last long because they degraded a lot of that topsoil. But as you can see, there are a few trees in the background. It would have been the same. Some of those trees survived fire and they grew. And so this was pretty much what a high prairie is. And in 1942, a lady from the Leonard Graphic, her name was Hattie Baxter, she visited with a gentleman who had been in the area in the 1870s and prior, but had left and came back. And so she visited with him and recorded what he said, and this is what he said, and his name was William Kirk. And he says, "I've stalked many deer right here on this square," talking about the Leonard Square. It was a Leonard picnic when he was back. And it was called Elm Flat. And there were deer, wolves, bears, wild turkeys, prairie chickens, and rattlesnakes galore. There were bees in every hollow tree, which was confirmed by Davy Crockett, as a matter of fact. And the prairies presented a beautiful array of flowers of all colors in the springtime. When the water gave out for the cattle in dry summer weather, men would go down to the bodark, dig down in the middle of the creek, and strike water within a few feet. Then the neighbors would take turns drawing water for the cattle. So that's a whole different kind of life than what we're used to. But, that's what they did. And that's just kind of an idea about what this area around Leonard kind of felt like back in the 1870s, which was pretty wild. Everybody recognize this? Bodark. There we go. That's a bodark tree. So this is a bodark thicket. That's what a bodark thicket looks like. We have those as well down in the bottoms in and around Leonard, in your Trinity River bottoms, your Bodark Creek bottoms. A lot of those were thicket areas like what we picture here. Now, these were tough to penetrate and deal with. I mean, they grab and they pull and they cut. So most people avoided them, except for those people who, didn't want to be found. Okay, and there were quite a few of those around as well. Now, Leonard, the area around Leonard was purchased in about 1852 or so by a man named Solomon Langdon Leonard. And he was a wealthy circuit court judge from St. Joseph, Missouri. And he bought the land, he went back to St. Joseph, and in 1861, he was coming back to Leonard to survey his lands or move down. Well, anyway, he drowned crossing the Grand River in Fort Gibson, Oklahoma. And so this kind of left his family in turmoil. So his heirs were his children. And so they owned this vast tract of land in Fannin County, Texas. And eventually they kind of came down and they hired a land agent and they started selling these things off. But it took them a while. So it was kind of a vacant landowner sort of a situation there for a good while. And of course, in the late 1860s. Of course, people had lived in the area around Leonard and in around Grapevine since the 1820s. You've got people filtering in from the east and settling down and, building homesteads, or most of them, came through the rivers and they developed ferry crossings and the like. So this was all happening in the 1840s and 1850s. And Fannin County had pockets of settlers from New York, Ohio, Missouri, as well as typical states from the South that you would see: Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, a lot of folks in there. And they mixed pretty well, generally because they had one enemy, right? The Indians, yeah, the Comanches primarily. So, and this is all prior to the Civil War. Most of the settlers got along because they were focused, on the Indians. Anybody ever read Empire of the Summer Moon by S.C. Gwynn? Okay, you guys are familiar. If you haven't, I highly recommend it because it gives you a different perspective of what that all was like. Because the Eastern settlers had never fought a mounted Native American foe up until that point. You were hiding behind the trees, fighting battles and skirmishes like that. But once they hit the edge of the piney woods, it was wide open. And the Comanches had horses for 200 years. And so they were expert horsemen, and the native settlers had never faced anything like that. So that kept them behind the pine curtain, as I call it, for quite a while. Okay, until the late 1840s, when Samuel Colt invented his revolver. And then after that, the Texas Rangers used it, and they were more adept at fighting the Indians then. And it was after that, a lot of the settlers came across. So most of the settlers, they faced a lot of hardships, and it was hard coming across. And this is just a graphic of kind of what the area looked like. You've got a couple of towns that are on there that are current towns, not necessarily historic towns, but to give you an idea of where this thing was. Now, a lot of these bodark thickets I were talking about were Wildcat Thicket. You see a Mustang Thicket, and then the Black Cat Thicket down here. So those were just impenetrable areas that a lot of those people who didn't want to be found, that's where they hung out. Now, before the Civil War, most people don't really understand it, but you have some of those people from New York and Ohio that settled through that North Texas area. So when it came up to the idea of succession right before the Civil War, in Grayson County, of the 475 that voted, 250 voted for succession, 225 voted against. So there was a lot of contention. There was a lot of division in a lot of your North Texas counties because of those issues. And that not only stretched in Grayson and Fannin counties, but all across, so from Gainesville all the way to Jefferson, and Sulphur Springs. So there was a lot of division in there, and that caused a lot of mistrust. There was a lot of violence during that period, from the late 1860s to 1880s even. And so the federal government even had issues getting in here and trying to calm that down. It was just a very violent place. One of those violent outbreaks was what we call the Lee-Peacock feud. Now, this happened right in that Four Corners area of Hunt, Collin, Grayson, and Fannin. And the paraphrase version of this is that Dan Lee, who was a cousin to Robert E. Lee, sold his holdings in Virginia and came to the Fannin County area, and it was rumored that he had a fortune in gold, right? So as those rumors perpetuate, of course, everybody's trying to get that fortune in gold. And after the Civil War, his son named Bob Lee, who was a captain in the 7th Cavalry under Nathan Bedford Forrest, come back to Fannin County, had it decorated. He was kind of a famous guy. And anyway, he and a friend were captured one day and taken to Sherman by some Unionists who thought that there was a bounty on his head for war crimes. And when they got almost to Sherman, they sent a guy up there to tell the court that they had him and found out there was no bounty. So they came back, and so they roughed him up a little bit. And Bob Lee offered to give him his mule, his saddle, a $20 gold piece, and a promissory note for $2,000 in gold, and if they would let him go. And so they said, yeah, we'll let you go. You know, we got this thing here. Anyway, a few weeks later, and that group was led by a guy named Lewis Peacock. And so a few weeks later, you know, Bob is at Pilot Grove, which is a little town that's kind of south of Whitewright over here. And it was a big community at that time, but there were a lot of Unionists that lived in that area. He saw one of these guys that was in the group, and he said, hey, you know, bygones be bygones, I want to be left alone. Just leave me alone. And so anyway, later that day, that person who was in the group, you know, shot at him and hit him in the head. It didn't kill him. But anyway, he was taken in by a guy who was a doctor there named William Pierce. And so William Pierce cared for him, and after a week or two, you know, he was able to leave and whatever. Well, a few weeks later, another gentleman came up and shot the doctor for taking care of, you know, Bob Lee. And anyway, that was the first person killed in the Lee Peacock feud, was the doctor who saved his life. And so from there on out, it was, you know, killing each other and whatnot. And anyway, Bob Lee was ambushed almost at the corner of where Hunt County and Fannin County meet. And see, that was February 24, June 25th, 1869. That's when he was captured and killed. And then after that, a lot of the family members, Southern sympathizers, you know, really went after a lot of the Unionists that were over in Pilot Grove. And a group of these were the Dixon family. And many of you know maybe John Wesley Hardin. Any of you familiar with that name? Anyway, he was a first cousin to this Dixon group and ran around with them a lot at this period of time. So he could have been involved in this later shooting that killed Lewis Peacock. So they went over and killed Lewis Peacock. And that was really the end of the Lee Peacock feud. And so anyway, there's that just to show that that was just a very violent period. And this was before Leonard was even established. It was just a crazy place back then. And then in 1872, the Missouri, Kansas, and Topeka Railroad crossed the Red River into Denison. And then from there, you know, they wanted to build railroads pretty much everywhere across, you know, Texas to get cattle out, people in, you know, goods and whatnot transferred. So in about 1877, the MKT Railroad decided they needed a spur from Denison down to Mineola, which was a main crossing of what is now Highway 80 from the east, from Louisiana, Mississippi. A lot of travelers through there, so that they thought they could get a lot of goods and whatnot back and forth. So they made that spur into Mineola. And then in 1880, that line was completed. And then you saw towns popping up like Leonard and Trenton and Celeste and places like that. So, and that was in 1880. And then in July 22nd, 1880, the Leonard heirs and their agent, H.L. Parmalee, who, by the way, trivia question, H.L. Parmalee's brother-in-law, so his wife's brother, was Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph. So they were part of the group that came down from New York and settled north of Leonard, what is now Valley Creek. So you had a lot of communities out there around Leonard, and when the railroad came through, a lot of people came to the railroad because that's where the commerce was. So Leonard was established in July of 1880, and they had a picnic downtown to auction off lots for the town. So Mr. Parmalee, he bought the first lot to put in a dry goods store to sell to the railroad workers there. The second lot was actually purchased by, let's see, what is the name? Mark Daniel, And within 2 days, he had a saloon up and going. So that was the way of the West, right? You know, the second guy, he puts up a saloon to make money. And then the citizenry of the time decided to celebrate that date with an annual picnic. And we just celebrated this year the 146th annual Leonard picnic. So we've only missed 3 years that I know of. So we missed 43 and 44 during the war, and then also 2020 we didn't have it. So that was the 3 that we've missed. And then by proclamation from the Bonham Commissioners in 1889, they recognized Leonard as an incorporated city in Fannin County. It's a picture of our depot there. This is taken in the 40s with the steam engine right there. And that was a major travel method between Greenville and Denison. So if you wanted to ride the Denison, you could actually ride to Denison and then catch the interurban, you know, into Dallas if you wanted to. So a lot of people traveled that route. And it was active into the 60s. So, you know, the development of Leonard, this is an early shot kind of showing what Leonard looked like. What do you not see there? Cars, yeah. Trees. Yeah, a lot of trees. So this was just another shot that this was really high prairie. You know, you have a few trees in there, but not many. And so we have a cottonseed mill there right by the railroad track. You've also got the cattle lot for shipping out. And you have the town developing right back here in the back. A lot of wooden structures, mostly wooden structures. Everything before 1900 was primarily a wooden structure in Leonard. And we also have, this is a 1900 shot of the train depot and a lot of the cotton bales that are coming in from outside the area. And this was a manual process at the time, you know, picking cotton and planting cotton and a lot of that stuff. But you would have a lot of the cotton buyers that came in via train and stopped at the depot, and they would come into town and they would stay at one of Leonard's 2 hotels at the time. And then this is a typical kind of wooden store. This is probably like a metalworks shop. They probably build some of those rain collectors and different tanks of certain things right there. But a lot of these buildings in the time, they primarily burned at one time or another, because during the winter people would have open fires on the inside and leave them unattended, and they would burn. And then you also have around early 1900s, you have the mechanization of agriculture. So with this, it changed the dynamic of the town. Most people, you know, sharecropping was a major industry at the time. And they would, raise crops on somebody else's land and share the crop with the landowner and whatnot. So you had every 40 acres, there was some house out there and somebody farmed it. With the mechanization, that decreased a lot of that. So you could farm more with less. And so as that progressed, more people moved to the city and kind of started that movement. Now here's a street view in 1904, and we were looking at another picture back there in the back that was probably taken at the same time, but it was only a part of that. So that's an original picture back there, and this is a copy of one of the originals, but it shows our Leonard courthouse, which stood from around 1904 to 1881 to about 1908. And this is kind of a typical, market scene. There's a lot of activity there. Generally on Saturdays, people came to town, because there wasn't anything else to do in the country, right? So you can kind of see back here in the back some of the there's a couple of wooden structures in between some of the brick structures. And there's a gap right here in the back, and you can see some housing. You can also see some of the early electrification of some of the little small cities in Northeast Texas. So that was a thing going on back then. Most of the country people didn't have that until the 30s, primarily with the development of the REA and things like that. But some of the city people did have electricity on back into 1900 and around 1904. And then here's a shot of our what I call our middle courthouse. Miss Peggy probably remembers it, but it stood from 1908 and torn down in 1964. And, a lot of people ask, well, why would they tear down such a beautiful building? Well, one reason is our shrink swell clay soil that we're so well blessed with in Leonard. Foundation cracks are a problem. And when you have those foundation cracks, you have plumbing issues. This, of course, did not have running water on the inside for the longest time. If they did, it was a retrofit. Any kind of restroom facilities were in horrible shape. And so they decided, and at the time in the 60s, nobody could really afford, to fix it. So it was cheaper to get a government grant and put in one of the nice little 1960s, post offices there on the square. So anyway, this was our middle courthouse. And out here in front, this was probably about 1908, 1910 or something. But you can see in the middle, with the gazebo out here, this is a Model T Ford sitting there in the middle of it. So there's nothing like a spectacle to draw a crowd, right? And at this time, it was a car. And so up until then, we've seen pictures of buggies and wagons and everything else around the dirt Leonard Square, right? So anyway, somebody brings a car in here, and this is the crowd that it draws. And so we've still got, in 1915, you can see some brand new buildings, nice 2-story buildings on the square, and we're still driving cows through the middle of town. And then here we go. In 1915 or so, this is our southeast corner. You start to see a few cars. Some of the more wealthy townies, have cars now, but you still see a lot of the country folks coming in to bring their goods in wagons and buggies and all that sort of thing. And over here on the far end, you can kind of see some dry goods and whatnot. And then there's a pool hall back over here on that upper east side there. And this is a picture of our Masonic building there in town. They had the Masonic area up on the second floor. And now, just a few years later, this is 1917. You can still see, all these townies. Everybody's been playing keep up with the Joneses here. We've got lots of cars in town, but we've still got the muddy streets. You just can't get away from the muddy streets. But you see a lot of the people hanging around town. We've got a lot more buildings. You start to see most of them are brick now instead of the wood buildings. And then you have different, as these technologies develop, you have more businesses in town coming in. These guys are pretty prosperous and improvising to work on all these cars that these townies are buying, right? Looks like a pretty tough deal they got going there. But then in 1923, lo and behold, we've bricked the square. So, they had a bond and bricked the square around. So now you don't have to drive in the mud. We've got nice curbed concrete walkways and not those old wooden slat, sidewalks there. So, boy, we're really stepping uptown. And this is what, let me go back one. Right down at the end down there, that was one of our Leonard hotels. And Tom was pointing out one out across the street over here that used to be an old hotel by your park with the little cabins over there. And it looks almost the same style as that one down there. So a lot of times those contractors would come in now and they had a blueprint for a hotel. They would build it here, build it there, and keep moving around. So it's kind of the same thing. It looks like a lot like the one we have here. This was another hotel in Leonard. It was the Egbert Hotel. It was active from 1894 to 1933. And the 1930s was when the cotton started really playing out in the area. So a lot of your cotton buyers didn't take the train to come in and stay in the hotels or whatnot. So they ran down and finally closed. And then they were torn down. This one I think was torn down in 33. But so we lost a lot of those type buildings. And then in 39, due to some safety concerns, this road, this is Highway 78 that goes to Blue Ridge. So it used to go straight across the railroad tracks, but they had problems with the train coming through and, people on the tracks and that sort of thing, wagons and loads, and somebody would tump over their hay or, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, the railroad came in and they put the underpass in 1939 that solved a lot of those issues. The train could run freely across without any hazard. Oh, and you still see our hotel right here on the side. That was part of it. Went pretty far back, and it burned in 42. And then we still have different projects going on today. Some of the older houses are moving around, redoing, refurbishing. We have a lot of that activity that goes on. And we also have new businesses that come to town. McDonald's, Leonard has a McDonald's now. If we didn't arrive, back in the day when we got the brick square, we've arrived now because we've got the McDonald's. So they just opened up this past August, I believe. Yeah. So population's increasing. Leonard is changing again. It's always changing. So we have to face those types of things. Now, here's an example of a historical event that happened in Leonard in 1947. So the Missouri-Kansas Topeka, it was a passenger and freight line that were used on the tracks. And in November 47, the MKT Bluebonnet passenger train had a wreck. It ran into a cargo train. They were going the same direction. The cargo train was trying to get off on a side track to let the Bluebonnet pass. Bluebonnet was going a little faster. The cargo train was going a little slower. Anyway, they ended up running up on top of each other. The engineers on the steam locomotive, they set the brake and they hopped off. And then the brakemen on the cargo train, they just ran up a few cars and they kind of ran together and derailed. So this was a big spectacle for a lot of folks, and somebody captured it on film that we still have, or else, it would have been lost to history as well. So nobody was hurt. It was kind of miraculous. They bussed the passengers back to Greenville, and they brought in a crane, a rail crane, on the tracks, and it picked up the engine, and it served, they got it back running again, and it served up on into the 60s. So not much damage, but it looks pretty bad, and, caused a lot of people to come out and gawk at it. Here's just a few more pictures of it. And we have a place in the museum where we kind of highlight what's going on here. There's the rail crane on the side where they're picking that thing up. So now, historical preservation as we move forward. So that's an example of what we think of as a historical event. We have those happen all the time. And so now in today's environment, what do you guys use to document your history? Facebook, yes, digital media, social media, a lot of those things. So we don't take pictures anymore and print them out on film to put in our scrapbooks or have them for our children to find and say, well, we don't want these anymore, let's give them to the museum. So we don't have that really anymore. So how do we move forward, with the social media and online forums? Our local newspaper, the Leonard Graphic, closed in December of last year. They've published their last edition. So we don't have a news place to go look for news anymore or archive our news, because the day-to-day happenings of our community are really being lost without people recording it. I mean, you could go and filter through people's Facebook stuff, but do you believe everything you see on Facebook? I don't either. So, I mean, some of the newspapers, I don't really believe, everything that was in there either. But, outside of anything else, that's what you had. But that was our main community record of information. And so on this social media platform, who owns those images? If you printed them off and displayed them, I mean, do you have to pay somebody, or is somebody going to get mad? Is there going to be legal action to you for using some of that? Those are still probably bridges that we have to cross later when those things come about. But, it's still unknown at this time. And then who's responsible for documenting and collecting memorabilia? So when somebody brings you something, you take it face value, and you may know them, And you may know that piano came from, so-and-so house downtown, and it's a relic. George Washington played it, or whatever they tell you. Sometimes you just don't know, but you need to document a lot of that memorabilia. And what of the new things that are around, what is going to become historical? What's going to be considered historical in the future? I mean, I don't know. Is one of these PlayStation things that the kids have now, is that going to be something that we want to preserve for history? I don't think it is, but somebody might. We just don't know. Moving into the future, when somebody brings something by, or what to keep, what is historical. That's a matter of perspective. But a lot of times we just don't know right now what that thing is until maybe it's 20 years down the road and you're looking back, man, I wish I would have kept that, whatever it was, and sometimes those things are gone. So kind of have to be vigilant about what we might think is historical, 20 years down the road. So this is a picture of our south building and how we have it outlaid. You can see the fire truck in the back there. But most all of this is a mixture of pictures and then people's stuff that they've given to us, right? We have it kind of outlaid in a manner to kind of have little sitting areas and display cases and signs and whatever we can to try to bring people back to what they might remember. Tom and Linda came back through there. They saw stuff that, this family, I went to this house or whatever. You can kind of look back and that's what we want people to do, is have a sense of fondness, towards the past. Now, recently, a couple of years ago, the building next door to us, the roof caved in, and we had a common wall that stretched across. And when the roof caved down, there were some common beams that ran through that lifted up our wall and caused that top brick section to topple over, which penetrated into our north building. And so it looked like this. We got a lot of rain damage in on that building. So some of those display cases and some of the other relics were damaged by the water. We had to throw them away, that sort of thing. But we had insurance on it. So we came back, we had the roof repaired. We opened up, instead of having the wooden ceiling in there, we took all that off. So you just see the joints, painted all the roof and everything black, give it kind of an industrial warehouse kind of look, I guess you'd say now, and then put in new lighting inside so you can really see. So we have yet to get in there and arrange these items in a really nice manner yet. So we're still working on that. It takes a little work, but we just haven't gotten to that yet. So that's part of moving forward. Now, our short-term goals, we're looking for grants that might help us with overhead costs. Our biggest costs are insurance, electricity, gas, and water, utilities. Those are our biggest, So we have a fundraiser once a year at the Leonard Picnic, and it's a pie and cake auction. And we usually raise enough for that, to cover our expenses throughout the year. So that's been good to us, but it's, what? What's a pie and cake auction. Yeah, dessert auction. Yeah. So we raise enough for that. But that's slowly, edging down. And so we're probably going to have to look for new fundraisers and whatnot to try to offset the costs. And we want to improve our displays with relevant and clustered artifacts, trying to bring in maybe a family, a temporary exhibit for certain families who want to show off some of their older stuff or highlight their Leonard activities or whatnot. If they were in the riding club, having, some of the riding club artifacts, or, fire department, or, if they have something like that we can put a temporary rotating display in, something to try to draw in, more family members. And then just look for creative ways to showcase, current history. Like we had a recent new school open up, a new elementary school. We probably need to get out there and take a picture of that and display it with our older type of pictures and whatnot. And then at farming activities, most of our farmers are gone, believe it or not, out there. We have probably, of the I would say 10,000 acres of land still current in cultivation. There are 4 groups right now that farm all of that and work all of that. Whereas, used to there were, 8,000 farmers out there, tilling their 40 acres. So, I mean, that's a whole change in dynamic. And then, there's an unknown section of that is, what else can we do that we're not thinking of? So those are things. And so adapting to the digital age, we're looking at doing a virtual tour of the museum. Some museums that you go to now, they give you a little box and you can poke a number and you find the number on the wall and you can listen to those type of recordings about what that artifact is and what it means to our community. So we're looking at doing some of that. Also interviewing local people who may have an attachment to those different artifacts and putting those things on YouTube where you can walk around with your phone, not even have to have one of those little gadgets. You can walk around with your phone and just walk around from station to station and listen to people talk about what that means. So some of the stuff we're working on, and of course we don't have a website, but it's one of the things that some young person who's technically savvy might take on one day. Of course, we are a 501c3 organization. And also, Tom and Linda, they challenged me to find a grapevine connection, between Leonard and Grapevine. So I don't know if any of you know Nick Leckie. Anybody know Nick Leckie? Okay, all right, great back here. So a Leonard connection. Nick Leckie, and I just visited with him last week, works for our company, Katie Johnson, who is in Leonard, Texas. So Nick, graduated in 2000 from Grapevine High School, UIL Texas wrestling champ, also Super Bowl champion with the 2009 New Orleans Saints. He just got inducted into the Kansas State Football Hall of Fame. So, great athlete, great guy. So anyway, I work with him, occasionally. He works for the same company. So anyway, there's Nick. Also, not to be outdone, LHS class of 1952, Peggy Smith, right over here. You don't know how hard I had to work to find these pictures right here. But here they are, So anyway, right here in our midst, Leonard graduate, class of 1952, Peggy Smith. So anyway, it's just a Google snapshot of what Leonard looks like today. Soon there'll be a subdivision right here, capturing all this. The school owns, the new school is right here. So this will be kind of developed into school property. There's a new subdivision. Of course, you can see subdivisions going in right out here. We've got the new North Texas Municipal Water Plant that covers from 69 down to 78 right there. New subdivisions going in here and here. So, it's filling up. We'll be prosper one day, I guess. But any questions? Yes. Yes. 1880 was the first, actually 1880 was the first gathering to sell lots. 1881 was the first Old Settlers Reunion, which turned into the Leonard Picnic annually.
My birthday is July the 22nd.
Oh, okay.
1934, and we got new dresses. Everybody got new clothes to go to the picnic. It was just a big celebration.
Oh, it was huge. Yeah, especially, I think probably the highlight, from what people tell me, the highlight years of the Leonard Picnic were in the 50s. Am I right? Yeah. So 1950s, late 1940s, that was the highlight because, kids didn't have anywhere else to go. They just kind of hung around and, hung out on the square or, went to people's houses and things like that. So the Leonard Picnic was a big deal. Yeah.
So many people came by.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, yes. At our Preservation League, we meet the third Monday of every month. We do. All three of us. Well, we have some transient members that come and help us sometimes. When they figure out how much work it is, they don't stay too long. So it's primarily three of us that kind of keep the thing moving.
So you've got new subdivisions going in. What brings these younger families or the families?
Boy, that's a great question. Somebody, I think Linda was asking me this earlier about what the constitution of Leonard is now, and it's mostly all young people. Yeah, it's crazy. So we're a typical bedroom community. A lot of those folks, they'll drive into Dallas every morning. It's just a big wave of people driving into Dallas or Greenville. It's about an hour and a half, depending on traffic. Yeah, I mean, Melissa now has a lot of industry. Anna has some industry. Sherman is booming. I don't know if any of you guys ever been to Sherman lately, but that TI plant right there, they expected a boom of population in Sherman of 40,000 people, and I mean, those people are hiring. Let's see, I'm trying to think. Royce City's got a lot of industry that's kind of come in. Rockwall, and Garland, so people can kind of come in several different ways from Leonard and go to work in what we call the Metroplex. And a lot of those young people, that's what they do. They're being chased out in pricing. They're being chased out of McKinney and Anna and Van Alstyne and yeah. So anyway, they got to go somewhere, right? A lot of times they'll go to Leonard, Honey Grove, Bonham. When they made Highway 121, when they made it 4-lane all the way to Fannin County, I mean, the doors were open. That's when people started flowing out there.
What is Leonard's current population?
The current population on the sign is 1,990 individuals. 10 dogs, 3 cats, 4 chickens. But that is incorrect because it is changing so fast. And I was talking with somebody else. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Peggy. But our church did a demographic study about 3 to 4 years ago. And it was one of those we know what the stated population in Leonard is, but what is it if you go 4 miles from the city center in a radius? And it was roughly about 8,000 people in that 4-mile radius.
Do y'all have a hospital?
No. Nope. Yeah, maybe. But, there's a hospital in Bonham. There's a hospital, Presbyterian, in Greenville. There's Baylor Scott and White in McKinney. And there's Sherman has Texoma Health Center. And so those are all within 30 minutes.
They're within 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get 30.
Sometimes you don't. That's right. Sometimes you don't. But those are the closest hospitals. I'm sure as the population increases, then there will be a hospital there. But right now we do not. We treat them like the old days.
So the picnic now, do y'all charge for people to go, and how many people can go? And
Well, right now it's sort of free. So we don't have tickets or anything like that. But we do have a carnival. We have a really good carnival and have had for the last 2 years. So you pay to do the rides. The carnival charges to do the rides. We have vendors out there that have general fair type stuff. So they'll have jewelry and trinkets and hats and knives and bath bombs and candy and all kinds of stuff that they're selling, along with food and things like that. And we have concerts there that are sponsored. So all day Saturday of the picnic, there'll be music. We've had a car show. Of course, you got to pay entry fee for that. We don't charge for parking. It's on a donation. Some of the school groups will be out there, and if you want to donate to them, they'll help you park, that sort of stuff. So it doesn't cost you to get in and do stuff. But, if you wanted to do the carnival or something else, then yeah, it'll cost you some money. But it's generally to help other groups in the Leonard area. And like we were talking earlier, they have a fireman's barbecue. So that's anytime you get people into town, people turn it into a fundraising kind of thing, probably not any different from Grapevine. But we have a fireman's barbecue to raise money for the firemen, and that's on picnic Saturday. And right on back end of that, we have our Preservation League pie and cake auction to raise money. So after you've had a lot of barbecue, you can buy a big pie, and cut it on the table. So so it's one of those events, but it brings the community together.
Is Leonard related to the Leonard department store?
We used to have several what you would call department stores. We don't have anything that I would call a department store anymore. We do have boutiques, and we do have a Dollar General and a Dollar Tree. But that would be the closest thing we have to.
But that Mr.
department.
Leonard wasn't connected to the Leonard department.
Oh,
Leonard
no,
Brothers.
not that I know of. No, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Anybody else? Yes.
What size is your school, like 2A?
It's 3A right now. It's a small school, 3A. I think I used to be on the school board. Of course, in Leonard, you get to do a lot of things. So I think our last census for the school was right at 885 students. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does KDJ do?
Okay, I'm a salesman. And if you'll stay after, I'll sell you some electrical panels or maybe some protective relays. But that's what I do is I sell high voltage power equipment, and I cover East Texas from the Red River south to Jasper and Livingston, and then from Louisiana over to the Metroplex. Cover a lot of the East Texas electric cooperatives.
Do y'all manufacture those?
We do not. We're a manufacturer's representative, so we're a contracted sales agent for different manufacturers that don't have their own sales forces. So I talk a lot. Oh, thank you. Oh, another question.
Grapevine was, when we didn't really have South Lake and Collinsville, we were surrounded by dairies. Did you all have a lot of dairy?
In the 30s and 40s, and probably up into the 50s, we did have a lot of dairies. And there are still some prominent families who are like dairy family people, but they don't operate the dairy anymore. Most of it converted into commercial cow-calf operations, and just because they were small and the corporate dairy folks, kind of ran them out, and so that's kind of where it went to. We don't have any operating anymore, but they did have some back in the 40s, 50s, and 30s. All right. Thank you very much.